every year during fall and spring migrations. The number of birds he finds depends on the weather.
On clear nights, we tend to find less because the birds can fly at a higher altitude. It's on the cloudy and the foggy nights where we find the greater numbers, because of course below the cloud level.
Do you ever find really large numbers of birds on one night?
Oh boy, the worst night I can remember, it was May 16th, 1990, and I came down on a foggy morning, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of birds flying all over the sidewalk. So much to the point where I was literally having to tiptoe between the bodies.
Wow.
To make sure that were they dead, were they alive, were they injured. And it was like the tip of the iceberg I picked up that morning. And that's when I really started taking this problem seriously.
Now, is there anything that can be done about it?
You know, it's ironically simple, simply turning out the lights.
Really?
If it was a matter of these towers being blackened during the migration seasons, this problem would not occur.
Songbirds use the stars as signposts. When clouds obscure their sky map, city lights draw them in. They need help to escape the city's canyons, if it's not too late. Michael Measure is campaigning to get office lights turned off in migration time. He's hoping other cities across North America will start to protect the songbirds too.
Rob just missed getting rid of those this morning.
Did he?
Uninjured birds are sent on their way from a city park, but the rest stay here forever, a long way from the warm south. Half the neotropical migrants from all of North America winter in Mexico and the Caribbean. Ocosingo is a market town in southern Mexico, the center of a fertile valley. Nearby ruins are from the time of the Mayas. This land has fed a human population for thousands of years. A few remnants of forest line the riverbanks. Space is at a premium on the wintering grounds. Birds that breed right across the north must crowd together with year-round residents into a much smaller land area. Recently, cattle ranching has cleared the land still further. So where do all the songbirds go? That's the question these researchers are trying to answer.
Here's the red star next.
Red star or ovenbird?
Led by Russell Greenberg from the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center in Washington, D.C., they're studying neotropical migrants in their winter habitat, something almost nothing is known about.
1 minus
1. You want to check this?
Yes.
This group is making some unexpected discoveries.
The overall story in this region in recent decades has been the loss of forest. But it isn't as if the forest is lost and then behind it is simply a denuded landscape, which is totally inappropriate for birds, and particularly migratory birds. In fact, the story is extremely dynamic and extremely variable. It's what you would call a mosaic of habitats rather than a single habitat. This mosaic represents the diversity of ways in which people have managed land. Some of these methods of managing lands actually have their roots in the traditional land management of the indigenous people that lived in this region before and continue to live in this region.
The recent unrest in Mexico happened here, among these people, who feel increasingly cut out as Mexico enters the global economy. For generations, they've practiced small-scale agriculture, which fits the natural community around them, rather than the international market. They grow coffee in small plantations in the shade of the forest. This method needs few chemicals, so insects are abundant. So is fruit from native shade trees, and so are songbirds. Our spring would have more voices if the people here could make a living this way. The pressures of reproduction are over. The migrants aren't quite as particular about the habitat they share with resident birds. But they all need food and cover in a landscape threatened by the machete. Local corn cultivation uses a crop rotation with a long fallow period. 2 fallow years in this climate, and you've got a thicket like this. Once they've cut and measured their way in, the research team will survey the bird population here.
Yeah?
Yeah.
They want to know how useful as habitat this part of the Ocosingo mosaic is. Cattle ranches are spreading across the valley, spurred by the prospects of international trade. It's one of the issues underlying the local conflict, and it isn't good news for the birds. But even here on the ranches, they've found somewhere to shelter.
There's one habitat we've been doing a lot of work on, which is basically simply a woodlot on a ranch of thorny acacias, and maybe a little bit of shrubbery in the bottom. And it's the simplest habitat, it's the most open habitat, and yet it has the highest density of migrants that we found in any of our censuses. And this goes across a number of species. I think of the 20 species that we consider common enough to look at in southern Mexico, 9 of them achieve their highest densities in this habitat. And you just wouldn't know by looking at it. It just doesn't look like much.
Mexican ornithologist Javier Salgado is checking the mist nets in an acacia woodlot.
Bueno, una bolsa. Tenían suficientes bolsas ahí para...
The number of songbirds here suggests a way to help them on their wintering grounds by promoting plants that serve both bird and human occupants of the land. Acacia spreads rapidly in spite of ranchers' efforts to control it. No-nonsense thorns keep grazing cows at a distance, but they eat the pods as they fall. The seeds pass through the cow and spread across the pasture. Shade, fodder, firewood, and construction timber. The scientists hope the acacia will spread even faster. Fences offer other possibilities. Using posts that sprout into trees is a tradition that suits birds as well as humans. In this shared land, live fences tilt the odds a little more towards the birds. Javier Salgado.
The live fences are going to have a double function, as, for example, as boundaries between properties, and also are going to give a refuge for the migratory birds, and not just for migratory birds, also for the resident birds around the area. I think that just a little change in the management where they have the cattle or agricultural activities is going to improve the capacity for the migratory birds to come.
Up until now, a lot of conservation in Latin America and the tropics has been focused on the protection of large tracts of pristine habitat. I think that it is important to remember that at best, maybe 10%, 5 or 10% of the tropical forest will be protected in some sort of pristine state, which leaves an 80 or 90% of the landscape that's used by birds, that's maybe even necessary to maintain healthy populations of birds, and need some attention in terms of our thinking about conservation.
The valley of Ocosingo was once part of a great forest. There's a desperate need to save what's left across the tropics. But from south to north, the songbirds' range has almost all been cleared and occupied. It's human landscape now, but there could be room for the birds. People and songbirds share one space, gazing at each other from worlds that intersect. But we're discovering that more than half the world's bird species are now in trouble. Birds are a measure of the forest's health, messengers from an ailing planet. In the Americas, we're not at crisis point yet. The numbers are dropping, but our songbirds are still abundant. Can we act while there's still time?
The Magazine with Brian Stewart.
Good evening. Our first story concerns an animal that is closely associated with this country, pride of the North, the polar bear. Now, they certainly capture the imagination of many people around the world, but tonight we look at what science has to say about one set of polar bears, those living near Churchill, Manitoba, on and off the shores of Hudson Bay. Scientist Ian Sterling believes they are sending a signal from the ecosystem, and as he studies their declining weight and falling birth rate, he worries something may be very wrong. The magazine's Eve Savory takes us to the shrinking bears of Hudson Bay.
Got something there, Eagle? Well, we'll let you know in a second here. Going over it on the right at 2 o'clock? That's the one I'm going to take a look at. Yep, 3 of them. Where is he? I lost track of him. On the dry lake here. Just near the beach edge. Oh, yeah, I got him. Okay, let's do it. You want to do him? Yep. Okay. Well, there we go again. Yep. Plenty of it.
They call Steve Miller the Eagle for his acute vision. His passenger calls Miller's ability to anticipate bear behavior eagle magic.
There's a stumble there. He's down. Good.
Miller's passenger is one of the world's top authorities on polar bears.
Now.
For 18 years, the Eagle has maneuvered Ian Sterling and his tranquilizing dart rifle to a perfect shooting position 4 to 5 meters above the ground.
But I think we're going to have to jab pull the first 2 with a little bit in the neck. The third one's down well, that's good.
The team, which includes colleagues like research scientist Nick Lunn, is the reason humans know more about the 1,200 polar bears of western Hudson Bay than any other polar bear population in the world. And the bears know more about humans. These young males are getting a just-for-safety Telazol chaser. The drug has already left them conscious but immobilized and tranquilized. They'll stay this way for the next 2 to 3 hours.
Don't want them to be lying head down because you don't want his viscera up against his diaphragm. So he's nice and comfortable, breathing perfectly well. I can take out the dart and I can not worry about him now. Oh, we can get him out of here.
80% of the adult bears in this area have been tranquilized, handled, tagged, tattooed, weighed and measured, had blood drawn, teeth checked, their behavior and their life history recorded, many more than once.
He'd be a 3 out of 5 for fat, Steve.
Of everything they check, it's the fat that tells the story.
We take a subjective sort of a fat condition, with 3 being sort of average size, and what we're basically doing for feeling along the spine for how much sort of fat is in here. A really big pregnant female with a lot of fat would be 5 out of 5, and they're just big tubs of jelly with little legs, stubby legs sticking out. Straight line, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, it was 4 years old, first caught in 1998, 15 kilometers south of Broad River.
The Canadian Wildlife Service has been gathering data on the Churchill bears for more than 30 years. Other polar bear countries can only envy the depth of knowledge Canada has.
It's quite unique, extraordinarily valuable, especially now when we're trying to look at possible effects of long-term changes in climatic or ecological conditions, because we have detailed information on the situation before, and that's very unusual. 12795, double check. 65. Good thing I checked.
That data bank is why they know something is wrong.
He's not as fat as he would have been 15 years ago. He's probably 80 or 90 kilograms lighter than he would have been 15 years ago. For this time of the year, they should be, a bear like this should be this big around.
The problem is they are ice bears, and the ice is disappearing.
You can see the size of the paws that these guys have for swatting seals, for big claws for gripping on the ice or tearing a seal apart.
The first bear to step on the ice was probably a grizzly, and it's had a couple of 100,000 years to become the perfectly adapted ice animal it is. White hair for camouflage, black skin to absorb heat, and for insulation, fat, lots of fat. Polar bears don't chase prey, they stalk it. And marine mammals are their prey, ice their essential platform. But the bears of Hudson Bay have had to get used to ice that melts completely every summer. So in late July, these bears have always been forced to come ashore, and with no ice to hunt from, they just don't eat until freeze-up in late November. To get through that summer of fasting, the bears have to really layer on the fat before the ice breaks up.
So if that gets shortened by 2 or 3 weeks, that's a lot of energy that they don't get to store on their fat. It's pretty important to them.
These days, breakup is, on average, 10 to 14 days earlier than a couple of decades ago. This year was much worse. The bears were forced off the ice and into their summer fast almost 4 weeks before normal. The whole region is being affected.
This is an amazingly dry year. Sometimes when you see the bears running, dust comes up from under their feet. The tundra out in here in places crackles when you walk on it in places, and things like this. This used to be a lake.
A few years ago, he and other scientists used to swim in this lake near Geese Field Station. Temperatures in western Hudson Bay have been steadily rising 0.3 to 0.4 degrees every decade since 1950. The result, this year, vegetation bloomed a month early and then died in the drought. As for the ice, this satellite photo supplied by the Canadian Ice Service shows what Hudson Bay historically was like on July 1st. The ice is just beginning to melt. And this photo shows what Hudson Bay was like on July 1st this year, all open water.
If things keep getting warmer, this is probably the direction of the future.
There's 2 families, isn't there? Female with a yearling and a female over there on the green with 2 young cubs.
The extra weeks of fasting are hurting all the bears, but it's the females and their nursing young that are showing the greatest distress.
She's feeling it. That's good. I think I got a fairly reasonable angle with the dart.
The mother has been darted and cannot move. The 2 cubs will be given a tiny dose by hand. Nick and Ian move in from either side so the cubs feel surrounded.
Get around here.
The safest place is with their mother.
That's it. You just stay there with Mom.
They are 8 or 9 months old and completely dependent on her. At this age, they won't be weaned for at least 1 more year, probably 2.
Hey, these are really skittish ones.
One cub has got the drug.
Want that one to go down a little bit first. They'll be out like a light in just a moment.
Once all 3 are quiet, Ian gives them a shot of penicillin to prevent infection from the dart and the handling.
I got tags, yeah, so we would have caught them this spring, so.
Both cubs are female, and they had a brother.
No, she had triplets this spring.
Oh, she had triplets this
so
spring?
She's lost one.
Probably starved. Just not enough food to go around, yeah. They compete, the cubs compete with each other for nipples too, you know, so you're weaker, you get less, and eventually maybe get left behind or die. Yeah, pull back.
Of the families they caught this spring and found again this fall, fewer than 2/3 of the cubs have survived, and it's early yet.
This is the number that it will have for the rest of its life.
The odds are the number they tattoo on the smaller cub won't be seen again.
This cub is pretty lean. It's a 2 for condition. You feel its whole pelvic girdle. She's not I wouldn't give her a really high rate chance for survival. The timing of breakup is really important to these family groups because a mother like that has to not only be able to store enough fat for herself to survive, but she has to store enough for her cubs.
Yeah, here they come.
A pregnant bear in this area tucks herself away in one of these cool earth dens dug into the permafrost. She stays there all winter, gives birth in mid-November or later, and she and her cubs live off her fat until they come out in March. Her fast has lasted twice as long as the bears that hit the ice in November. She'll have lost well over half her body weight, and she'll be desperate to put on fat so she can nurse her cubs. With perfect timing, the ice delivers plump, newly weaned and helpless seal pups. But with warming, every day of earlier breakup is 1 day less for the mother to rebuild her stores of energy for the coming summer of hunger. The scientists have found that for every week the ice breaks up earlier, the bears come ashore 10 kilos lighter.
It means that she's not able to lay down as much fat or produce enough milk, and so something goes, and it starts with the weaker or smaller cub. And of these 2 cubs, this one is smaller and thinner, and if push comes to shove, it's going to be the one that's going to go next.
In the years they've been studying the bears, they've found not only are more cubs dying, but the birth rate has dropped 15%. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines blew its top, and the sulfuric acid particles it sent into the atmosphere cooled the planet. The following summer, the ice on Hudson Bay melted almost a month later than normal.
And that had a dramatic effect on the bears. They were bigger, they were heavier, they had more cubs, the cubs survived better, and the cubs that were born in that year, we call them the Pinatubo bears because so many of them survived from that particular year class.
In the air again, Eagle Miller starts herding his 4,864th bear.
It's just like people. Everyone's different. And you have to sort of, as you're approaching them, we have to sort of read them and see whether they're going to defy us, they're going to be afraid of us. And then picking your time, once the first one's down, you go in, you take up the second one, move him back to the first one, go back for the third one, bring him back in too. And it's just lay them out 1, 2, 3. It's relatively simple once you've done it a few times.
We have an adult female and a yearling cub.
The mother is small and very thin.
You jiggle there, there's nothing. You put your hand on the top of her back and you can feel her ribs. You can see she's straight down on the sides here when she should be around on her sides.
Her condition is a mere 2.
She's just got clear fluid. She doesn't seem to have much milk. Cub's a male eagle. So she's not going to have any more milk to give him. He's going to have to pretty much make it on what he's got. In fact, being this close to town, it's quite likely she's going to end up in the polar bear jail.
The polar bear jail has 23 cells and no rations. It's usually the females with cubs and the young bears, the inexperienced hunters, who get hungry enough to risk the trip to town and end up here waiting for their airlift north. As the bears get thinner and more desperate, they'll cross paths with humans more often. Early this July, a skinny 1.5-year-old male killed a woman and mauled a child and a man at Corbett Inlet north of Churchill.
With this early breakup in the winds, etc., we had a lot more bears offload north. And they're not used to dealing with a bear at that time of year. On a normal year, there wouldn't be a bear for another month around that area, if at all. B3190.
Wade Roberts, Manitoba's natural resource officer here, is the man you call when a bear comes visiting.
Any bears in that trap this morning, Jack?
Nothing. I checked the bait still there. They didn't come around. I guess the windows turned the wrong way last night.
By September 17th this year, he'd had 85 bear calls, several times the normal number.
This year, we're noticing already the bears are skinnier. Our wildlife people are saying that in actuality, the bears are smaller as well. The large 12, 14, 2,000-pound bears aren't around anymore.
The town of Churchill needs those bears. Tourism accounts for 60% of the town's economy.
Now he's looking.
There he's moving again.
In bear season, Tundra Buggy Tours books a year in advance and fills 426 seats every day, 7 days a week.
Aren't they beautiful?
15,000 tourists come to Churchill, and almost all of them come for the bears.
It's like a dream come true. Now you know they're really real. They're not these little fluffy things that you sit on your dresser.
The warming trend over Hudson Bay is what scientists have predicted will happen with global warming. At the very least, it's a dry run. The models predict the area will be 3 to 5 degrees warmer within 50 years, and with every degree, breakup will happen 1 week earlier.
Some people have asked me, why wouldn't they walk further north? Well, the reason is there's already bears there. The other reason is that these bears grew up here, they know this area, they're committed to being here, and if the ice just gets less and less and less, I mean, I don't want to sound like a sensationalist, but if the climate keeps on warming, ultimately there won't be polar bears in this part of the world.
The polar bears of the southern and western Hudson Bay are at the southernmost extreme of polar bear range, and that makes them a sentinel, a warning signal for what could happen to all polar bears and many other Arctic species if the climate continues to warm.
It's not just the bears, it's everything. We have 200-some nesting birds in this area. Everything is going to be affected by this. Also, what is the seal population going to do? It'll probably drop as well because they need the ice, they need the snow to have a layer to raise their pups. So if we lose our seal population, we're going to lose our bear population. So it's a sad thing.
On our last run, Eagle spots 3 huge males, or so it seemed from the air. And 2 of them, one a Pinatubo bear, are fat and healthy. But a male, born 1 year later when the warming trend had returned, is starving.
Yeah, he's thin. He's going to be a bag of bones by the time. He's not in danger of dying or anything like that, but he's going to be a bag of bones by the time freeze-up comes.
In the 12 hours we spent with Ian and Nick and Eagle, they caught 18 polar bears. It's unlikely all 18 will survive for the scientists to find again next year. These magnificent and intelligent animals of the ice fear almost nothing. Yet the research gathered here demonstrates if the climate continues to warm, polar bears everywhere will be among the world's most vulnerable creatures. For the magazine, I'm Eve Savory at Cape Churchill, Manitoba.
In the great wasp family, certain species live in societies with a complex structure, while others settle for a solitary life. One such wasp is the Odinera. It is a curious creature, both a digger and a builder. A digger because it digs holes, and a builder because at the entrance to its tunnel, it builds small chimneys with the earth it extracts from the ground and mixes with its saliva. Frequently, intense spectators take a strong interest in the Odinera's frantic activity. Despite their appearance, these are wasps too, but ones with a very unusual behavior pattern. The Odineras take no notice of their spectators at all and continue about their business, filling their warren with caterpillars captured in the surrounding area in which they will lay their eggs. The larvae that hatch from these eggs will eat the caterpillars as they grow. It is these very caterpillars that interest the fiery little insects so much. They wait patiently for the Odinera to finish laying their eggs before slipping stealthily into the tunnels. The pirates have but one aim, to lay their eggs in the caterpillars too. But their larvae develop faster than the Odineras and will replace their host's offspring, rather like the cuckoo's behavior in the world of birds.
אפשר לקנות את סרטי הוידאו של האוניברסיטה הפתוחה. פרטים בסרטיית הוידאו בטלפון 03-646-0585 ובאתר האינטרנט www.openu.ac.il /movies.
צפיתם בשידורי האוניברסיטה הפתוחה בערוץ 8. תופתנו באינטרנט www.openu.ac.il/tv.
אוקיי, עמוס, מדר, אנרגיות, שיהיה בהצלחה הערב. 10, 9, 8.
מה אני שומעת, עמוס? האם זו ציפור? האם זה מטוס? פיגוע ירי?
לא, סמדר.
קיבה מקרקרת?
סמדר, אוי, לא, זה לא אני, זו אשתי, ברכיק. יום בהיר אחד היא הפסיקה לבשל.
יופי, הגיע הזמן, לא?
אבל אני רעב, סמדר, רעב.
אקסן.
טוב לכם, אנחנו המוסף.
הוא עמוס רונן.
ואיתי, כמו בכל שבוע, האוצרת, היוצרת, המיצגנית, הבשלנית.
והייננית.
סמדר פיש אוחנה.
יש צד מלא לכוס, עמוס.
את חתיכת דג קר, סמדר.
ערב טוב. הערב המוסף כולו, עמוס, שים לב, בסימן השיות, אהובה עוזרי, המבקרות, ה-so-called, הכל הנשי,
הערב המוסף מגיע לחרם התימנים ולנהלל. אם תרצי, זו תוכנית דווקא בנושא חזרה לשורשים.
נו, let's face it, עמוס, השורשים שלנו חשופים וגם הקצוות מפוצלים.
תודה, סמדר. כעת צורכים לי באוזנייה שאם לא נראה לצופים תוך שנייה אנשים אמיתיים, הם ישר עוזבים לטברנה. ובכן, מפגש אלון אבוטבול עם הזמרת והיוצרת אהובה עוזרי.
המבקרות נילי לנצמן ומירי חנוך נוסעות לסדר שורשים בנהלל.
וכמו תמיד, גל זייד, סרט בית,
אדם ברוך
ועוד ועוד ככל שיותיר לנו הזמן.
אפרופו אהובה עוזרי, עמוס, שים לב להקשרים. אהובה גרה בנווה צדק וראה. הנה גם אנחנו נפתח את התוכנית בקבלת שבת בבית דפוס בנווה צדק.
ישבתי ככה במטוס. בא אליי דתיים נטורי קרתא עם הפאות עד הרצפה והזקן עד הרוב השני. ממאה שערים. אמר לי, אתה הוא בעוזרי, אמרתי לו, כן, עמד. לידי לא זז, כל המטוס מסתכל, איך? מה מתברר? זה היה איש קבלה, הוא פותח מזלות. רק לדבר איתו זה לגדולה. כל יום היה בא, קונה לי סיגריות, קונה לי מה שאני רוצה, אמרתי, יש דבר זה סמן היין המטורף. אמרתי לו, תפתח לי מזל, אמר לי, לא, לך אסור לפתוח. פתאום הוא אומר לי, מה את חושבת? שאני המאהב שלה, או שאני רודף אחריי. קיבלתי הוראה מלמעלה לשמור עליי. הוא אומר לי, את בת אלוהים. את כותבת שירים ויש לך קול, זה מתנת אלוהים. כשאת שרה, כולם בוכים מתעלדע. הוא אומר, תגידי לך, אסור לי לפתוח לך מזל. אבל אני רוצה להגיד לך משהו, זה מאלוהים. אם את לא תשמרי על עצמך, את תמותי צעירה.